said it after I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this, sir.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
In the wake of Hollywood's Weinstein scandal, allegations of sexual assault are swarming like killer bees. We've gone from a single scandal based on allegations that included some evidence to a frenzy of finger-pointing that includes allegations with no further support than accusers' claims of having told their stories to several people over a span of years. Listen and believe seems to be the order of the day, with most feminist-guided media presuming most or all accusations credible, with other outlets trusting accusations only when they're made against men of opposing political outlooks, regardless of credibility. The concept of innocence until guilt is proved seems largely to be left sitting in a corner gathering dust. And it's no wonder given the vitriol reserved for due process advocates these days. We're literally Hitler, didn't you know? Feminist outlooks are building on the frenzy to peddle thoughts on so-called toxic masculinity and push their belief that we live in a rape culture. Of course, it's an easy belief to push when you answer any discussion that doesn't involve condemning all men as rapists, creeps, or facilitators of other men's rapey ways with, "Oh my God, rape apology!" Advocate encouraging women to exercise our agency? Rape apologist. Point out that women are human beings who sometimes lie? Rape apologist. Dare to suggest that it's not okay to sacrifice innocent men to the gods of listen and believe? Rape apologist! Talk about female perpetration against men? Well, now you're just using deflection from the main issue as a form of rape apology, you shitlord. The accused aren't helping themselves out either. As conservative commentators have rightfully pointed out, weak hedging details don't help an accused man's case. While it's true that Bill Clinton's vehement denial of his affair with Monica Lewinsky turned out to be a lie, the listening public is less apt to believe that was a long time ago, and I don't remember, but I don't think I would have done anything like that, then absolutely not. Worse, we now have men assuming culpability as perpetrators in encounters that were described as consensual. Take Louis C.K., for instance, who, in the wake of his rash of accusations, acquiesced to the idea that as a popular comedian, his fame gave him a level of power over fans that made asking for their consent coercive. Never mind that his popularity is his fans' response to him, something they give and something they can take away. Never mind that he's not holding a damn thing over their heads, as would be the case were he in a position of authority like an employer. Never mind the degree to which this infantilizes women who, in order to support this narrative, must be incapable of losing respect for someone upon finding out he isn't the guy they thought he was. No, he is the all-powerful Louis C.K., whose requests cannot be denied and can therefore victimize people all on their own. Is this what progressive men get for supporting feminism's male power narrative? Maybe. But that doesn't make it right. And now, that reaction has established that entertainers who engage fans sexually are sexual predators. Countdown to accusations against every hairband from the 70s and 80s starts now. In the meantime, the entertainment industry seems to be on a familiar pathway. As during the McCarthy era, accusations are flying fast and finger-pointing is becoming a social weapon. Similarly, those accused are using a wider form of finger-pointing to deflect scrutiny from themselves, though instead of pointing to other individuals, they're pointing to their entire gender and society at large. And just as during the McCarthy era, the real issues of the day are being buried under the frenzy of accusers and accused scrambling to either get into the spotlight or out of the hot seat. Corey Feldman has been trying to alert the public to a pedophile ring in Hollywood for years. A documentary on that same topic, titled An Open Secret, was published a few years ago. Men and women have hinted all along that there are men and women in Hollywood with predatory tendencies who face no checks and balances to their behavior. In their wake, they've left scars on people's lives, with which it can take decades to come to terms, if ever. Yeah, I mentioned female predators too. We've all heard stories like that of Amy Schumer's 2014 speech at the Ms. Foundation for Women's Gloria Awards and Gala, in which she related an incident from her college days when, while sober, she chose to have penetrative sex with a person who was so stinking stumbling drunk he couldn't see straight or maintain erection or consciousness during the act. Remember the feminist outrage over Brock Turner's crime not receiving harsh enough punishment? When the mainstream press is given predator stories that don't fit their narrative, they pretty much disappear. Media that did report on Schumer's speech praised her for being powerful, intense, and inspiring. Based on Hollywood's history, I expect the eclipsing of actual problems by the accusation frenzy to increase over time. If not stopped, this trend will lead to the same thing McCarthyism did. The day will come when pointing out actual sexual misconduct in Hollywood, especially victimization of children, will be seen as hysteria, and anyone trying to discuss the issue will be dismissed as a fringe conspiracy theorist. We're looking at a combination of things here. Regressives have ramped up the listen and believe narrative as the rate of accusations has accelerated, and that has led the general public to be reluctant to vet allegations. Political tribalism has led to listen and believe being selectively applied on both sides of the fence. While we should be reasonably skeptical of any accusation, it's becoming common for pundits to remember that only when the accusation is against someone on their side of the political fence, while crowing every time an accusation falls on the opposite side. Speculations about accusations past and present have resulted in the public wrongly identifying men as perpetrators of incidents for which no perpetrator has been publicly named, endangering reputations and careers of individuals who may be innocent of the accusations. This can be a truly life-wrecking event. These types of accusations should never be tossed around so lightly. That has led to an environment of panic, with men scrambling for damage control in ways that, like Louis C.K.'s response, can be very damaging to the men around them. At the same time, an actual victim of childhood sexual assault, Corey Feldman, has been criticized for taking a strategic approach to dealing with his perpetrators after decades of seeking justice from an unsympathetic system, and eventually just acknowledgement. Due to California's statute of limitations on crimes committed against him, he fears legal retaliation for having named his perpetrators to the police, something that should never happen unless a report filed can be proved to be a false report. Yet people condemn him for not publicly naming names. Why should Feldman promote a public response that would result in condemning the innocent along with the guilty? Why should he put himself at the legal mercy of those who have already done him harm? And then there's the conservative response. Last week, senators and congressmen called for repercussions for the crime of being accused without even knowing all of the facts in the case to which they were responding. They were all ready to engage in a political lynch mob where a thorough investigation was warranted, even before Judge Roy Moore responded to the allegations against him. Now, Moore's denials are being examined for believability while his accuser's most solid evidence is that he signed one young lady's yearbook. There is talk of not seating him in the Senate if the people of his state elect him. Is Moore's denial less believable because he was inconsistent and not as vehement as his detractors would like? Possibly. But let's not forget how former President Bill Clinton shook his finger in America's collective faces and adamantly stated, "I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky." And that turned out to be a lie, while Michael Jackson's denials were deemed ridiculous. Yet child stars who stayed at his home, including Corey Feldman, who has talked about childhood sexual abuse, have said he was not a molester. It is far easier to let our abhorrence of sex crimes and our compassion for victims fuel an uncontrolled, outrage-based social panic than it is to separate credible allegations and provable allegations from those that are unverifiable but also unfalsifiable. Why is that so important outside of a courtroom? Why not, as feminists admonish, reserve standards for evidence for trial and either acquittal or conviction while supporting accusers in the public sphere? Judge Roy Moore's case stands as one answer. Here is a man who has clearly been blindsided by sexual misconduct allegations, most of which are not of illegal acts, and all of which are coming out approximately 40 years beyond the alleged incidents. While he has every reason to suspect political motives behind the allegations, he is being condemned by political pundits for responding to that suspicion more vehemently than he stated the repetition of his denials. His colleagues' doubts absolutely merit a robust investigation, but not the out-of-hand condemnation they engaged in from the beginning. What precedent does such condemnation set? It determines that accusations alone can be used to take down men in positions of responsibility, even when the accused is not someone with a history peppered with scandals, but one that is clear. It puts the social equivalent of a dirty bomb in the hands of wealthy and establishment competitors in the arenas of politics and business, who have access to either the loyalty of others or the funds to incentivize allegations. It means that a man can be severely penalized, career ended, reputation destroyed, for merely being the target of an allegation, without ever having his day in court. If we abandon our standards for evidence, we risk setting up a system in which any political initiative or business practice can be swiftly and effectively countered by having a woman make a vague, years-old, unfalsifiable, but unverifiable sexual assault allegation against the individual in charge of it. Threat of such allegations could be used to blackmail men in positions of authority into introducing or supporting initiatives they would otherwise never back. And we will never again be able to have even the small trust we now have in our political process. Evidence matters, even outside of a courtroom. Listen and believe is only a viable option in therapeutic settings where victim stories are part of their healing process. We cannot allow accusations alone to so deeply impact the lives of the accused without any legal recourse. Instead, when serious allegations are made, investigation should be our initial reaction, and our ultimate response should be based on what can be reasonably determined by assessing the available facts. That's vital if we want to maintain a functional society. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk number 13, Listen and Believe. Before I start, I wanted to remind everyone, if you want to join the chat, please go to the Badger Livestreams channel. I'll explain more about Badger Feed after the end of the show. My co-hosts tonight are Woozle Slayer Karen Strawn and that adorable specter of death, Prim Reaper. And as always, we have the supreme doge in charge, Brian Martinez, watching over us all. Tonight, we're here to tell you that we didn't do nothing. We was framed. It was a vast chicken wing conspiracy. I did not have intellectual relations with that political movement, Feminsky, and we want to talk to our lawyer first. But before that, I'm sure my co-hosts have interesting things to say about today's topic. What do you guys think of the sexual misconduct allegation explosion that's happened recently, and what impact do you think the public's reaction to it is going to have?
Oh gosh, I have so many things to say on it, I don't even know where to start. It's kind of ridiculous how the reactions that these guys are giving is making them look worse somehow, not better. It doesn't matter that Louis C. What he should have apologized to was his wife to her, but his career is still in shambles over it. People are being chastised for sexually harassing people, only then to have the chastisers later be discovered to have had their own experience of harassment. And like you a bit in the intro, not all of these incidents are created equal. You tell somebody you like their jacket with an accident
I think, honestly, like it is really getting out of hand. You have a situation where women in general are sexually attracted to men with high status. And then we have set up this kind of system where any man, any high status man, any man of higher status than the woman, any sexual misconduct, it is automatically an abuse of his power. And it's like, okay, so like, is Tom Jones, audience used to throw their panties at him, and that was taking advantage of an uneven power relationship? Like, I just, where are we going with this? And Louis C.K., I felt sorry for him when I heard what he was being accused of, right? And how benign and stupid it was, and that he was taking heat for that, right? Oh, he asks if he can masturbate in front of a couple of fans, and they say, sure, and then they spend the whole time fucking giggling at him, right, while he does it. They sure seem traumatized to me. And then I'm like, okay, so I felt bad for him until he opened his big, fat, leftist, progressive, feminine mouth, right, and said it was wrong, and it was an abuse of my power over them because, they're my fans, and, my popularity and stuff put me in a position where I could take advantage of them, and they really couldn't consent to anything that I asked. Like, give me a fucking break, right? You just screwed everyone, you dickbag. Why would you say that?
Well, I mean, like this kind of thing is resulting in the sort of warped belief that anyone who says or does anything outside of what a Tibetan monk would consider appropriate is unfit for participation in the workplace.
Well, and then I was reading, I forget what website it was on, but it was she was a hack reporter, right? So a lobby reporter or whatever for the British Parliament, right? So she's there to get the scuttlebutt, get the gossip, find MPs and backbenchers and stuff who are willing to leak documents to her and give her scoops and all of that, right? And she wrote this big, long article essentially apologizing for using her sexuality to exploit male MPs, to get information out of them that she would not otherwise have gotten. And to say that not only did she do that intentionally, but she found it exciting. She found it thrilling. Most of them were perfect gentlemen who never actually crossed the boundaries that she had set, which she said she set these boundaries quite broadly, right, in terms of flirtation and drinking and being maybe overly familiar and all of these things, right? But she said that none of them crossed the line from, returning the flirtation to over something that, would have made her feel really uncomfortable. But she apologized to them because she was part of that. But the way feminists would interpret that entire thing, even if she was throwing herself at these guys, which she kind of was, and giving them all kinds of signals, which she kind of was, right? They were wrong to, even, I guess, bask in the glow of the flirtatious hints and batting of eyelashes that she was giving them. Like, what the fuck is going on? I had a friend when I was in high school, and she told me that, when she was 17 or something like that, she had lost her virginity to one of a guitarist from a then quite popular hair band. And, she said that looking back on it, she really wouldn't have made that choice. She would have, she didn't really think it was a good decision. It wasn't particularly enjoyable, and she kind of regretted not having her virginity to give to somebody that she cared about or to share with somebody that she cared about. But she was just like, but I was a fan, and I went backstage, and he was hot and he was attracted to me, and yeah, I went for it. I was like, I went for it, and and so I mean, like, it's not as if women are incapable of having mixed feelings about their own decisions, but also taking responsibility for the fact that that was their decision to do that, right? This whole thing with Louis C.K., that was those women's decision to say, okay, you can masturbate in front of us, and then to giggle and kind of make fun of him the whole time, and oh my god, that's just gross and weird. Like, I can just imagine what they were doing while he was doing that, right? And it's just, they had it was entirely up to, like, what did they think he was going to do if they said no, right? Yeah. What was he going to do? The worst he'd do is say, okay, you guys are going to have to leave.
And everybody's acting like what he did was something incredibly abnormal, but it's actually not the least bit abnormal for that to be an area of sexual interest. And that's something both sexes do.
Shit.
Like,
I mean, like,
there's a whole section, if you go to any porn site, there's a whole section on masturbation. So obviously somebody likes to watch it.
Well, and for fuck's sakes, like, I mean, they said that he got naked before he started doing it. Like I said in the Breaking Badger, why didn't they start leaving as soon as he was taking his shirt off? Like, okay, all of a sudden we know what's happening. We know he's not joking. Let's go if we have such a problem with it.
Yeah, it's just
like a whole fucking thing.
That whole thing was so stupid.
It really was.
But the only thing stupider than that whole thing is the fact that he said, yeah, it was an abuse of an uneven power relationship, and those women were really not capable of consenting to what I did.
And it's like people tell pop icons and stars, and that they're so big that people, even like, there are people that I would fangirl over. I'm sure that you guys have the same thing. But for Pete's sake, if they did something that I was uncomfortable with or thought was wrong, that would change my opinion. It wouldn't suddenly make me subject to abuse. I'd be like, screw you, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like, what the, like, I would climb Clive Owen like a fucking fire pole. Okay, I would absolutely do that. But, and if he invited me to do that, I'd be like, I really have to think about, just go through the cost-benefit analysis here, and a very big part of me would want to take him up on that. And honestly, like, the fact that if he did that, or if he did something weird in the, like, if I was having sex with a celebrity or getting intimate with a celebrity and they did something weird, right? Or something that put me off. I mean, it's not like you can't tell them, oh, I'm not into that.
No. Well,
can we just stick with this thing over here, right? Like, oh my God.
Gosh, it doesn't even have to be something weird these days. Like, I love how a lot of the stories of a workplace characterized by sexual harassment that I'm seeing is people making sexual jokes to each other. One that I heard of recently was somebody at IGN saying to somebody, when I was your age, I could go all night, and touched her arm like when she had to work late one night. I know that some people are uncomfortable with physical contact, but Jesus Christ, dude, they've made more explicit jokes in Disney movies.
Geez, my answer to that, if I didn't like that, my answer to that would have been, well, there's medication to help prevent that. You can come out of the bathroom and take the medication and you'll be just fine.
There you go. But like the article that was talking about this, the person was saying that she was having a panic attack over these kinds of things. this is what society looks like when we tell a generation that they never have or that they have a right to never feel uncomfortable. Like, if these guys had to face some of the comments that I faced in my first job, they'd probably wet their pants.
Jeez, you want to know a panic attack? You get called into the office and backed into the corner and yelled at by your boss for not violating company policy in order to cover her ass. That's a panic attack. Because there's nothing you can do. And you're on camera getting yelled at. And if you do anything back, you can't prove what she was saying, but she can prove that you hit her. So, yeah.
Well, with one of the questions I keep wanting to ask in terms of the sexualized workplace and how this victimizes women, because, like, again, when I was working my last job at Tony Roma's, we initially had a dress code that was, you wore black slacks, black shoes, black socks. You wore a black shirt that they provided to you, which was essentially sort of like a soccer shirt or something like that, right? Which was made out of really gross man-made material, and your apron, okay? And it was all very, very, very low-key, and the slacks you had to wear, you were not allowed to wear black jeans, you were not allowed to wear, anything made out of stretch material, nothing, right? And then they relaxed the dress code. The girls started complaining, and I complained with them that these shirts are horrible. They don't breathe, and they're really uncomfortable, and they're unflattering too. And I mean, like, that matters, right? They're boxy and shapeless, and everybody looks terrible in them. And so she relaxed it. She said, okay, well, you can wear black casual top, right? But it has to be fairly modest, because this is a family establishment and we want to keep things professional. And you can wear skirts in the summer if you like, okay? Oh God, it must have been maybe 2 weeks before these girls were wearing black tank tops that were so low, the scoop necks were so low that the lacy tops of their balcony bras were showing. They were wearing hot little black dresses with cutouts down the sides. They were wearing backless blouses or lace back blouses. They were wearing skirts that were shorter than their aprons. They were just totally taking advantage, right? Yoga pants, right? And she would try and rein these girls in. And the whole time, one guy got in trouble because he was digging through his laundry, and he had just basically kept wearing the same Tony Roma's shirt the whole time, right? But he didn't have a clean one. He was digging through, his drawers. He found just a plain black crew neck t-shirt, which was not acceptable, but it was what he had, and he wore it to work, and it was perfectly modest. It just wasn't business casual, I guess, right? And he got in trouble for that, right? But these girls were getting in trouble constantly, and the list of what was not allowed on the board, right? And the penalties if you come in wearing one of these things, right, got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because, they were like, okay, so I can't wear something with cutouts, but I can wear something with a lace back, right? Or I can't wear a tank top with a scoop neck that shows the top of my bra, but maybe I can wear this tiny little t-shirt with a scoop neck that shows the top of my fucking bra, right? Like, I mean, they were just really, really pushing at these girls. And then they started complaining that there were so many rules for them and no rules for the guys. And I'm like, oh God, you stupid bitches, right? What the fuck is wrong with you, right? They're like, well, why do we have no spaghetti straps, no bra straps showing? Like, why do we have to follow all these? It's because the guys don't break the fucking rules.
Well,
right?
also the guys don't have that
and
variety of clothes.
Yeah,
they don't. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, That's these women creating a sexualized workplace. That is what they are doing. They are creating a sexually charged workplace by intentionally dressing in a sexual manner, going out of their way to do so, following the letter of the law, but not the spirit, right? Until a new law has been made and they can't do that anymore, right? And I'm thinking to myself, because women's sexual attraction is largely based on behavioral cues from men, right? So attitude and confidence and, and things like that. But men's sexual attraction to women is largely based on visual stuff, right? So it's almost like, and women, when they're subjected to unwanted sexual behavior on the part of men, right? They cry harassment. And I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't being subjected in the workplace to unwanted visual signaling of sex from women, wouldn't that be the male equivalent of being sexually harassed? I mean, wouldn't that be, a massive distraction?
It would. And there's been rules for that, governing that in the workplace and in the education system for years and years and years. And there have always been girls that have challenged it. Like, how dare boys have a different approach to their sexuality? How dare they have a different sexual nature than we do? As if biology is not allowed to happen, and hormones are not allowed to cause differences, even though there are significant, obvious physical differences in the bodies of men and women. And they never will take into consideration the fact that, like, there was one group that did. This was at my church when I was a kid. And it was because this discussion about sort of clothing and sexuality and everything happened because the microskirt came out. I don't know if girls are still wearing microskirts like they did when they first came out in the 80s. They're probably wearing them without leggings now. But schools started making these rules against microskirts, and we started having this discussion in my youth group about differences in how girls dress versus how boys dress and everything. And the sketch was, a married couple, and there was a curtain in between them that was supposed to represent, she's like in the bathroom or the shower or the dressing room or something, and so she's got this big fuzzy bathrobe, and she's like, I forgot to get my shirt. Can you bring me my shirt? And he goes and he gets a t-shirt, and it's like, no, that's not the shirt, it's the strappy shirt. And he comes back with a different shirt that has some straps on it. No, it's not that strappy shirt, it's the strappy tank top. And he comes back with what looks like more like a wife beater style tank top. No, that's not it, it's the strappy tank top. And it just went on, and finally he comes back with this the shirt that she was looking for. And the whole point of it was, guys have, a few style of shirts, and they're usually utilitarian. This shirt is worn for this purpose under these circumstances because you need to cover your skin, or because you need to allow air to go through to keep cool, or because it has to be like the wrestling garb. You wear that, the wrestling uniform. You wear that partly because you don't want your opponent to have anything you can grab hold of to take you down with, and the same thing with various other athletic uniforms. Each one is specialized to that particular sport, and your work clothes are specialized to look professional and respectable and competent and strong and so on, even so far as arrogant in some ways. Whereas the majority of women's clothing is designed to communicate, I can have babies and I look pretty, and come and look at me, I'm attractive. See, I have boobs, that's our clothes are made. Look at my butt. That's what our clothes are made for. And You can't wear something like that and then say that you didn't wear it for the goal for which it was designed, and then complain that it met that goal. You just show everybody your cleavage and, oh my gosh, somebody looked at it. How dare they notice that you were showing this part of your body off? You know?
Well, they're allowed to use that in any way that they see fit. They're allowed to criticize men's sexuality as long as it's a thing that's being used against them. And gosh, it's so horrible. But then the second that they want to actually like show things off, then they're like, oh, it's not sexual harassment against men. They want to see that stuff, right?
Right. And the whole point of the discussion I remember having was, the burqa wasn't a thing back then and under discussion, but it was like, you don't have to dress like a nun to be respected, but don't expect to be treated as though you've dressed like a nun, ignored as though you've dressed like a nun if you dress like a hooker. Yeah. You find someplace in between that you're comfortable with, and enjoy being a girl and enjoying women's fashion within the boundaries of common decency and common sense regarding where you are.
What drives me crazy, though, is the argument from feminists is that means that you're repressing women's sexuality and you're forcing them to erase their sexuality within the workplace. Well, except for that sexuality is, according to you, it has no business in the workplace.
Well, that's just right. The workplace isn't about your sexuality. Why bring it in there, and why insist on flaunting it or flaunting it?
Yeah. And like what I loved about being a cook was that all of the cooks, at least in high-end places, right, or fairly high-end places, is all of the cooks were wearing just standard cooking whites. There were no women's whites and men's whites, and they were specifically designed. They have those cloth frogs to close, not buttons but frogs, and they're double-breasted. And that is so that when you spill something hot on yourself, you can just grab hold with one hand and take your shirt off and strip down. And all the frogs just pop loose really easily, unlike buttons. But essentially, like what you have is this situation where it's the cake and eat it thing. Women should be able to show off their bodies and make every environment sexual in that way, and then complain about men sexualizing the environment by responding to that in some way. Right? They want the burqa. They want the burqa to be over men's eyes.
Well, and it's stupid because they also want to not have to gear their clothing choices to the utilitarian purposes that men have to gear theirs to. And one of the places I noticed is, like, you worked in a restaurant. I worked in a gas station that was pretending to be a restaurant. We had this itty-bitty little kitchen in the back that they turned an office into a kitchen. It was terrible. It was supposed to have room for 4 freezers. It had room for 3, so they stuck 3.5 in there. One of the things my boss had to tell people upon hiring: do not wear open-toed shoes in this environment. Here we are, it's a little bitty gas station. It's not a great big, convenience store. It's just a little bitty convenience store on the corner of a block that had other businesses like crammed up against it, a business and a school. And you couldn't walk around in there and expect that you were never going to have your toes stepped on by a consumer. And we had consumers that came in that were working construction, so they had big, heavy, steel-toed work boots on, which make you clumsy, and there's nothing you can do about it. We had devices on wheels that we had to roll around. We were working in an area where we carried heavy things that you drop it on your foot, that's not going to feel too good either. And these idiots had to be told. If they weren't told, we would have had girls coming to work in that environment in flip-flops and sandals and stuff, because they're not mindful of what can happen if I do this. So it doesn't surprise me entirely that they don't foresee, if they show off their tits, that somebody's going to notice their tits and be attracted to them. But it's still, it strikes me as absolutely ridiculous that they're accommodated in being outraged over the fact that somebody showed the tits that they were noticed. It's just like it would be the same as accommodating somebody for being outraged that it hurt when they ran the wheel of the hot cart over their own foot and they were wearing sandals instead of shoes. So they actually got, the skin pulled off by the wheel or something like that. It's so stupid. You dress for your job with the idea that your clothing is supposed to facilitate your work, not get in the way of it. If these gals that were working at the place Karen described, if they really wanted to dress like that, they should have got a job at Hooters.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Agreed. I think one of them did actually eventually, but
hey, there you go.
But it's just, or maybe it was Joey Tomatoes. They all wear little black dresses and high heels there. But they, like that, the thing too, and I don't think it's that they don't realize that showing off their tits is going to get them male attention. It's just that they want to dictate which males pay attention and which ones don't. And so it's when they get unwanted attention from men that specific men that they don't want attention from, right? Then they get all grossed out and weirded out and pissy and upset and outraged and the whole bit, right? But
all the entitlement comes out.
Yeah,
I think the entire point of wearing those clothes is so that the Clive Owens and the Jude Laws and the Brad Pitts of the world will, and the Matthew McConaughey's, I guess, right, or whatever, right, will look at them and validate them and their sexuality, right, make them feel good about themselves, make them feel good about how they look, right? And it's only when the creepy men, in quotes, look at them that they get all pissed off. So.
God. Well, okay, I used to work at A&W when I was younger, and for those who have gone into an A&W in the last little while, you might know they don't exactly give you attractive outfits. But when I was working there, they gave you these big baggy button-up shirts that didn't show anything off. And to be fair, that didn't really stop people who wanted to flirt, if they wanted to flirt anyway, right? But I even had somebody 10 years my senior ask me on a date one time, and you know what I did? I sure as shit didn't report it to the boss as an act of sexual harassment. I politely thanked him for the interest. I told him I was already in a relationship. Problem solved. But God help you if you suggest to anybody that ends up in that situation where they get sexual attention from somebody that they don't want, that just tell him you're not interested and keep working. Just get back to work. It's not that hard. But what kind of a hostile workplace environment are you trying to promote here? Do you not realize that this is causing people to have panic attacks?
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do about the fact that something like 30% of all marriages began in the workplace? That the individuals involved, met at work. How do you deal with that? Right? This is one of the places where men, and at school, a lot of the other ones started at school. How do you deal with the fact that a lot of long-term committed relationships begin with someone in the workplace hitting on someone else or asking them for a date or whatever, right? Like there is a definition of harassment. Okay.
Yes.
Now I can come out and absolutely admit that what Harvey Weinstein did, on an individual basis, right? To each individual woman may not have followed this pattern. Right. And I don't think I think it's almost a misnomer to call it harassment. I think we could just call it misconduct and coercion.
Yeah. Misconduct is a good coverall.
Yeah.
Yeah. But harassment is like, my daughter had to deal with harassment. She had a guy, he was a coworker, kind of same status as her, from another culture, didn't speak much English, didn't quite know how the rules worked, I guess, here in the Western world, and he really, really, really pursued her, and she kept on. She started out polite and essentially saying, like, no, thank you, and please, don't ask again, right? And he just kept at it. It was sustained. It was over a long period of time. He would follow her out to the bus stop at 11 o'clock at night and start touching her hair. She's got very long hair, right? Yeah. And asking her if she wants a ride home and stuff like this, right? And finally she, and I had told her, I said, okay, well, let's try one more thing. Right? You tell him that if he continues to do it, he's going to get in trouble, right? Or maybe lose his job. Still kept it up. So then she reported him to her manager. And they responded in the most beautiful, beautiful way possible. The first thing that they did was they called HR to send somebody down to interview both of them, regional HR. And then they immediately changed the schedule so that they were never in the same department at the same time and never arriving or leaving at anywhere near the same time, right? And they changed his schedule, not hers. And then they, within a day, they had set up meetings, interviews with both of them, got the story from both of them. They listened to my daughter. They listened to not just what had happened and that she didn't want, and she wanted it to stop, but also what she thought would be reasonable in terms of this guy, right? He's a refugee. He barely speaks English. He really doesn't have a whole lot of prospects other than Walmart. And she said, I don't want him fired. I just want him to leave me alone. And I want him to not do this to other girls here either, right? And so I guess they put the fear of God in him, and he is still friendly with her, but has waved hi, says good morning, stuff like that. But hasn't bothered her since. And it's just like that. They did they talked to both of them, got their sides of the story. Apparently he admitted it. He was like, yeah, I've been doing that. And they put him on notice, and he's been fine ever since. And it's just like, that is the way that should be handled, right? Even though it's genuine harassment, that's the way that should be handled. And, as opposed to, and this is the thing that gets me, is that it's not, with something like Weinstein, someone like Weinstein, it's not just that he was this, sexual sleazeball, right, with these women. He was like a 100% toxic personality. He was physically violent with people he believed who had crossed him. He destroyed careers and reputations of people who didn't do what he wanted. He was a bully. He was just like, both men and women lived in fear of him and his ability to essentially ruin them. And the thing is like, everybody was sort of, when the Weinstein Company came, when all of this went public and the Weinstein Company fired him, right? And everybody's like, oh, well, that's great. And it's like, no, that's not great. That does not show anything about Weinstein Company's virtues, because they knew it was going on the whole time. And they allowed it to happen. They allowed it to continue, and they did everything in their power to prevent anybody from actually coming out in a very public way about it. Because it was easier to bury the allegations. And some of the reason why this goes on is because there's not just a stigma attached to coming out as a woman or a victim and saying, I was victimized in this way, right? There's a stigma attached to companies that allow this to happen even once right under their nose. And they don't want that stigma to stick to them. And so they actually often bury the allegations and hide what's going on, which allows it to continue. But it's so that their reputations remain untouched, right, or undamaged as a company. So it's almost like the huge stigma and the outrage and all of the way we see this, the way we view this as like a uniquely monstrous crime or a uniquely monstrous type of victimization, right? Because that is the public response, that gut level response, right? When a company finds out that it is happening in their company, right? I think, especially when it's somebody who's very important, who's doing it, who's very important to the company, their first instinct is to cover it up so that none of that mud sticks to them. And, so, I mean, like, honestly, a more rational, reasonable public discourse about this, including really egregious cases like Weinstein, would actually make it so that companies, when they find out that this is going on, would be more likely to, come out and say, this is going on, and we're going to deal with it, and rather than cover it up and, convince women to sign freaking non-disclosure agreements and do sealed settlements and pay them off and and pave the way for things to continue as they are. So, I mean, like, the entire way we're approaching this is so bass-ackwards if we want anything to actually improve. It's just the public panic over this. And there are going to be lots and lots of men who get caught up in this in terms of the severity of the consequences being completely overblown compared to the severity of the crime itself, or the sin, or whatever you want to call it. Just because everybody's now in a freaking lather over it. So,
I want to really quick jump in with a super chat. Jimmy Farrow gave us $5 and says, "You look nice today sounds a lot different coming from George Clooney than Steve Buscemi." And that is an interesting point as well. Women respond differently to the same thing. Of course, "you look nice today" sounds different to an ordinary woman than it does to an untreated or wallowing cluster B too. To an ordinary woman, it's "you look nice today." To an untreated or wallowing cluster B, it's "you don't look nice every day. You only look nice today." So, but go ahead, Prue, or Pren. I keep wanting to call you Prudence. I don't know why. I've had that all day.
I don't know. I just wanted to comment, like, Karen was pretty much saying something exactly that I'd wanted to say for a little while. There was a study that Allison had posted a little while ago talking about how a victimhood mentality can actually lead people to behave in ever more selfish ways. And I was just going to say how it kind of feels like this sort of thing is actually coming out more and more here, because not only are people feeling victimized over smaller and smaller offenses these days, but they're actually demanding more in atonement for their experiences. Like in the smaller instances, you have people walking out of their jobs, like in the IGN example that I provided earlier, over claims of a toxic environment, demanding that things change to suit their needs rather than finding another job. But in the larger instances, you have people demanding that folks never be allowed to appear in the public eye again, and that everyone, even tangentially related to them, has to apologize for ever having been in their presence. Like, a good recent example of this is Andy Signor, formerly of Screen Junkies, and the video that they made about that. They're talking about him as though he is all of a sudden a monster now, and they're all apologizing basically for having even been associated with him. And like, these demands are getting more and more ridiculous, and people are successfully getting what they're asking for. So really, I'm not at all surprised that more people are coming out about whatever little things that they can possibly think of, because being a victim these days pays huge dividends.
Well, and it's when you kind of look at the attention, right, that you can get, as you know, and I would never say this about Corey Feldman. I think it's absolutely a shame that he, in order to get any attention onto the problem and any sympathy for the problem. You had to piggyback on this bullshit around adult women being, sexually coerced by men like Harry Weinstein.
And he didn't do that on purpose, though. And the thing is,
no, he didn't.
He's been talking about this for years and getting flack for it for years and being treated like a nut job for years and an outcast for years. And like 3 years ago, I think it was about 3 years ago, An Open Secret came out.
Barbara Walters.
Yeah, no, the documentary, An Open Secret, came out with recorded evidence of this type of behavior. And worst of all, the person who it was most solidly proved to be engaging in it was a guy who was in charge of the careers of several young male stars whose parents had trusted them to live with him. He was the overseer of the Screen Actors Guild's, their special organization for the protection of children from exactly this type of abuse. He was one of the founding members of that. And that comes out, and people still treated Corey Feldman like he was a conspiracy theorist or yammering for attention, stuff like that, trying to...
Or they just shrug, right? And they just shrug and...
It's like, I looked at that, and I thought, this is why his you haven't heard much from him, you haven't seen much from him in film and everything. He's been blacklisted. And I've suspected that for the longest time because he came out and started talking about this stuff. Because he was great in everything he was in. He was always fun to watch. He was always, this guy that was always entertaining, and he was always fun to watch, and he was an attractive actor, and everything that it takes to actually be good on the big screen, to be great on the big screen. And then all of a sudden he disappears when he starts talking about this. That's not a coincidence,
Well, and what with all of this that's going on, right? And I mean, like, it is rising to the level of a moral panic, and it's getting to the point where I called it in my Huffington Post interview, which the article's up, and I essentially published the entire interview on my blog because I gave very, very long, detailed answers to her questions. And not much of it made it into the article. And she did do a fair job of quoting me. She didn't really, she didn't turn me into some kind of horrible monster. But one of the things that I mentioned to her is that that when you have a lynching culture, right? When you have a moral panic, what you get is a lynching culture. And when you have a lynching culture, and it's a metaphorical, or speaking metaphorically, nobody really looks around and thinks about what the hell are we doing until the bodies have piled extremely high. If you look at the moral panic around that started with McMartin preschool, and then swept across the United States and even into Canada with this sort of satanic ritual child sexual abuse going on that was supposedly going on in daycares all across the continent, essentially. There were over 100 people, I believe, prosecuted in that conflagration of moral panic. And I don't know that any of them were guilty of anything. And as far as I know, a couple of them are still in prison. So and the people who actually called for calm, the people who, one of the journalists who actually, she wrote a lengthy article essentially describing what she was seeing going on, which was, in her words, a moral panic where innocent people were being caught up in something that was like a mob mentality. And this is in an era before Twitter and before Facebook and before all of those things, right? This was in the era of TV and newspapers. And this could happen even, and she was absolutely vilified as, you know, a pedophile apologist and a Satanist apologist, and she was promoting and she was excusing the sexual abuse of children because she was doubting their stories, and I just absolutely, I was a teenager when that whole thing started, and I watched the news and I just sat flabbergasted watching actual news reporters reporting on this stuff, right? That there are literally babies, newborn babies being sacrificed in chambers, you know, dug into the ground under daycare centers, and then their fat being melted and turned into fucking candles and for satanic rituals, right? And that 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds are being anally raped, you know, and then their parents come pick them up at the end of the day, and somehow nobody realized it was going on until, you know, little Johnny had a sore bum one day, and his mom freaked out because all of this is going on in the news, and so she reported it to the police, and then everything just fucking went haywire, right? And it's just like nobody stops to look around and really ask what we're doing until the panic's over. And with social media the way it is right now, I don't know how long this is going to be able to go, and how much more severe the consequences are going to continue to get compared to the severity of the offense before people start scratching their heads and going like, what the fuck are we doing?
Well, there are a couple of precedents, but they're authority-based precedents. I mean, you have, in the United States, you have the McCarthy era, where there were the communist witch hunts, and you had this situation where, you know, like I referenced in the intro video, people would get called on the carpet as communists, and whether they were communist or not, just like during the Spanish Inquisition with witchcraft, their only way to get out of the worst possible treatment, punishment, whatever, their only way to survive that was to point the finger at someone else, basically, and say, "Oh no, I'm not a communist. This person is a communist." Or if they couldn't get out of the accusation that they were a communist who went to communist meetings, they could reduce the penalty they were going to receive by naming other people who were at these meetings. If the meetings were fictional, they would just have to name anybody they knew. And people were throwing people under the bus, left and right, who were not communist, who had no connection or history of anything to do with the Communist Party or communist beliefs or any such thing. And it netted a lot more innocent people than guilty. It was almost entirely a hunt of it. And then there were people who got away with their actions and their behaviors by preemptively throwing other people under the bus. And so you had, if they were going to catch communists, you know, those guys would say, well, I'm not, you know, but this guy is. This guy, you got to watch out for this guy. And they'd go after that guy, and then the subversive would be able to continue to do what he was doing unscathed. And I'm sure if there were, you know, if there were property disputes or disputes over position, disputes over roles, you know, disputes over anything, that it played into that as well, because that happened during the witch hunts. When you had people who
the Salem, yeah.
Well, not just the Salem witch hunts, the witch hunts in Europe, the witch hunts, the Spanish Inquisition. Anytime somebody wanted to be able to, you know, get somebody's farm, or I want to date somebody's kid, somebody's daughter, somebody's son when they're of marriageable age, but the parents disapprove. Well, you know, his father's a witch, that kind of thing. And I can imagine this is just as we've seen it with, with custody battles and property battles in divorce, where the woman can allege abuse, or she can allege child abuse, or she can now allege marital rape. She can say, you know, oh, now that we're getting divorced, he's stalking and threatening me. Can I get a restraining order and all that? And it's so easy that when the guy is innocent, it's hard as hell for him to fight back. And of course, if he's even remotely guilty, it's impossible for him to fight back. So
Well,
in this
also,
situation, it's going to be
And
the
if he's
same.
in a hearing, and he acts put out by this, if he acts like he's annoyed in the slightest by all of this,
he has to be
that
so
makes
humble.
him look more guilty.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
on
The
top
guy
of
that,
that,
and so what I'm seeing is, I think this is going to go the same way, and I'm already seeing it starting, because they're already starting to throw each other under the bus, and they're already starting to throw all men everywhere under the bus and say, oh, it's toxic masculinity. So
no, they're not saying they're not saying it's toxic masculinity. Now they're just saying that all masculinity, period, is toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's my prediction though. My prediction is we're going to see something between like what Karen described of the satanic panic, the McCarthy era witch hunts, and the actual burning times witch hunts. Yeah, these are going to be some really rough times to be a person in a position of power, authority, or popularity. There's not nearly as many accusations coming out against women. The only one I know of is an existing accusation against Mariah Carey that has not been verified. The accusation itself, it's been verified that it's been made, but it hasn't been verified that it's true. But it's getting treated as just an accusation because she's female. Whereas when it's happening to men, it's like instant condemnation. You know.
Yeah.
And this thing with this
all of
thing
your
with the
jobs,
judge.
all of that.
Yeah, this thing with the judge is very disturbing. The minute he was accused, there were Republicans coming out and demanding that he drop out of the race. Judge Roy Moore. And it's like he didn't even get a chance to answer before they were demanding that he drop out of the race. I mean, do people realize the weapon that they are creating when they do that?
Yeah, no kidding. To these individuals, the only acceptable result is having anyone with even the hint of the notion that they are a red-blooded male interested in any female attention of any sort is to be locked away for being the deviant that he is. Unless, like Karen said earlier, he's attractive enough to tickle their fancy, of course.
Well, and if he doesn't tickle their fancy, he better not tickle anything else. You know,
No kidding.
That's
Or even
a
just
sad
say
fact.
anything. Yeah.
How to stay out of trouble in the office? Be handsome. Be attractive. Don't be unattractive.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. I got a super chat here from Wargoat6, who, of course, gave me a name I'm not familiar with. Let's see, that's Styx Hexenhammer 666. Talked about moral panics and how we are in another one.
I think that's a pretty popular YouTube channel.
He's a popular conservative.
Yeah.
Well, he's right. We are. We're in the midst of the opening segment, I guess you could say, of the next great moral panic. And whether or not people are meta enough and aware enough of history to recognize what's happening and put the brakes on will determine what happens next. But, you know, did either one of you have anything else to say on this topic, specifically basically the reaction to Judge Roy Moore's situation and some of the other accusations that have been not necessarily proved, but condemnation was the first thing that came out.
Well, I think essentially the more you have this happen, the quicker that condemnation is going to have to come in order to satisfy the mob, right? So I think the Republicans were they were responding to the situation as it's unfolding in the public discourse, which is if you don't come out immediately and say that's it, right? He's got to step down. He's got to go, right? If you don't come out immediately with that, you get criticized. You get criticized for waiting for his response. You get criticized for waiting for any facts to come out. Or any description of the claim itself, of the allegation, any details about it, you essentially have to respond quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker in order to not look like you're promoting or excusing or defending that person who's been accused. And so it's literally the poop is getting more and more radioactive, and that is hitting some of these men, and nobody wants to touch it. They all want to run as far away from it as possible. And it really is like, I feel bad for someone like, and I've discussed this, I forget with who recently, with Mike Pence. Okay, Mike Pence never has dinner with a female colleague without his wife there. Right? He's never in a room alone with a female colleague without somebody there. And there's a reason for that. He won't be alone with female colleagues because he does not want to be accused of misconduct. And he does not want to be out in public with female colleagues without his wife because he doesn't want any rumors that he's maybe having an affair, right? And so he's trying to stay on the straight and narrow. He is trying to not just behave properly, but demonstrate in a very public way that his behavior is proper, right? And he gets criticized by the left, by the Democrats, because this disadvantages women. This is not fair to women, right? And now it's like, but how do you even deal with these kinds of 40-year-old allegations when you're a judge and someone says, oh, he signed my yearbook, and I've heard some weird things about that signature on the yearbook, and I haven't been able to verify them, but there's been some suggestions that it was actually pulled off of the divorce papers.
Yeah,
that the victim, the alleged victim.
Said that it's his signature, but it actually is. It matches up to a signature of an assistant.
Well, I just but that it was pulled from because he presided over her divorce, and she was not happy. She was not happy with it, with his judgment, and she's not happy with the settlement. And so it's like, okay, but these are all things that I have heard. I have not had time to look into them and verify. So anybody wants to go looking into that, just take it with a grain of salt for now.
Yeah, what I wanted to add to that for my last kind of 2 cents here was, Karen kind of said a lot of what I had in mind, but yeah, the fact that we're even challenging this sort of listen and believe mentality thing means that we basically get accused of being rape apologists. But defending due process and defending rape are extremely different things. If these people are proven to have done these things, to have raped anybody or to have sexually assaulted or anything else like that, that's fine. Then we can go ahead and give them the appropriate punishment for the crime. But the key word there is proven. They have to go through the proper legal channels, right? And be proven to have committed these things. And if not, then we shouldn't be treating them poorly. We shouldn't be taking away their careers. We shouldn't be canceling all of their shows. We shouldn't be apologizing for even having spoken to this person at one point in our lives. We shouldn't do any of that. We have to wait until either they're proven to have committed the crime or to just leave it alone.
Well, I tend to disagree a little bit, right? Because it's very, 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 very difficult to demonstrate to a criminal court standard that something that you were sexually assaulted or sexually harassed or whatever. So I think that the burden of proof for the public to have a negative opinion of someone is going to be lower than the burden of proof necessary to put that person in jail, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
But, on the other hand, when I look at the reporting on the Gian Gomeshi case and how completely at odds with the actual reality it was, most of it was, so incredibly shoddy and spun so hard that, you had to actually look through the transcripts of the trial and stuff in order to actually get a feel for what actually happened in the courtroom and what was going on. So I don't know. We're stuck in this place where, I don't think that the public needs to have the same burden of proof to decide somebody is a sleazeball. But at the same time, you can't trust the media to tell you the truth about anything.
Yeah, and we can't let the public's opinion of somebody judge how we ought to modify the law in order to treat these people in the future so that these guys can then get the result that they deem most appropriate, right? Like the people saying that the Jean Gomeshi case was an injustice. Like, these people would have it be so that if these women said that Jean Gomeshi raped them or did whatever he did to them, that he would have gone away just on their word.
Exactly.
And this is basically what they're looking for, too. And some of them have actually come out and been very blunt about that they don't believe in due process anymore, that they don't want men to have their day in court if they are accused, that they don't feel that that's fair to the accuser. And they don't even consider the possibility that the accuser could be lying. I have a clarification on the issue with Judge Moore in the yearbook. Okay. See if I can pronounce this woman's name without sounding like an idiot. Her last name is Jarugi, I think. Okay. No, this is Philip L. Jarugi. I'm like skimming through this news story as fast as I can to get to this information. Oh, okay. What his attorney basically explained was on the paperwork, the final paperwork for cases that the judge presided over during the time period that he presided over this woman's divorce, he would sign the paperwork, and then DA would be stamped on the paperwork at the end, and that was actually by. I remember seeing this in one of the news reports that I watched. This was by an assistant. That was sort of his I saw this too stamp. And so it wasn't part of his regular signature. At that time, he would not have just anything that he was signing put that behind. That was only on that paperwork. So the fact that it's in that yearbook indicates that the signature was pulled from the paperwork and sort of forged into the yearbook. And if you look and see if I can open this news story here, we can get an image of the yearbook itself up on the screen. But if you look at the text itself, it's down here. This is what I was skimming through to try to get this information. Somewhere in here is a picture, and it's not showing in Google. So let's see if this is the right image here. I'm gonna actually have to click on the tweets to get it. And let's see. That's not the right thing. But it actually shows, well, here you can see it, but it's not very big. But you can see even in this small image that the two types of handwriting, what was written in the yearbook, and then the signature that's beside it. The handwriting is different. It's not the same. So I'm gonna scroll down this a little bit. There we go. There's an image that's cropping up. You can see it a little bigger there, and you can look the actual shape of the letters there. It does not look at all the same, and the the way the slant of the text goes is not the same. The way the numbers are shaped is not. Look at the sevens are different from each other. So I mean, I can understand why people are questioning these. And what has happened is Moore's attorney has demanded, and Moore's campaign has demanded, his camp basically has said, hey, we want this evaluated forensically to prove whether or not this is actually his signature, that whether the ink is that age, because they can find out if the ink is the right age. They can have a handwriting analyst look at this and say whether they're the same handwriting or not. They can say whether the dedicated part of it was actually written by Moore. You know, so there's quite a bit there that they can look at. And there hasn't been, so far as I know, there hasn't been a response of, yes, we'll release this yearbook for forensic examination. So it'll be interesting if the accuser refuses to have the yearbook forensically examined. To me, that will be flat out evidence that she lied, because if she's telling the truth, then she should want that forensic examination. And I think more demanding a forensic examination lends credibility, because if he knew he signed that yearbook, the last thing he would want is forensic examination. So it's not to say that, you know, that he never dated young women, but for crying out loud, most of the accusations are of him dating women who were over the age of consent. And we have an age of consent for a reason. After you hit the age of consent, you are over the age of consent. You are old enough to make your own decisions. If you decide somebody is too old for you to date, then you don't date them. And the idea of somebody, like the term cougar and the term dirty old man are both very insulting in terms of when they're applied to somebody over the age of consent, dating somebody much older than themselves, because they really imply that just because you're over the age of consent doesn't mean you're mature enough to make your own decisions. And you can turn somebody down, and if you don't, then you're already legally designated, you're already legally determined to be old enough to decide to date somebody.
You know, like, it's my relationship with my 20s. 16 years older than him, and funny, who, you know, just would be
Uh-oh. People are saying they can't hear you.
Hannah, you're going to have to pop out and back in again.
Better?
Better?
Uh-oh.
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I have a show that was...
Yeah, no. Hannah?
Can you guys hear me?
Are you there?
Yes, but now we can...
Now?
Okay, it's not at my end. The problem is...
Yeah.
Karen. Okay, Prim, don't try to talk. Karen, the problem is you are coming through Robo. Prim's coming through just fine. Karen's coming through Robo. There is no...
You're Hannah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, hold on a second, and we'll see if the problem is caused by having that news story open. Let me see if I can, because the problem started with having that news story open. And I think I've gotten rid of it. All right, Karen, try to talk. Oh, for crying out loud. All right, guys. Well, I think if I can't get sound from you guys,
Oh my god, it's just
Oh
nonsense.
god, Hannah, nobody can.
nobody can
nobody
hear.
nobody in the Discord can.
Okay, what's happening?
In and out and in and out.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
happening at both ends is that we're going in and out and in and out. So apparently we're all fucking the Discord.
Oh shit.
Oh my god! I totally. Oh,
yeah,
fuck.
I heard you there. That was good.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call the show.
Okay.
Because I think it's just the computer cannot handle that much, and I may have killed my connection by opening that news site.
Yeah.
So
If they have a ton of ads, it'll fuck everything up. It'll eat your bandwidth.
yeah. So and it's not the first time NYMag has done that to my computer, to be honest.
Oh yeah, those fuckers.
So, well, now we're back. Okay, so it took a couple seconds after I closed it, but it brought it back. So it was NYMag. Something.
Yep.
Probably something
What an
trying
asshole.
to. Well, this is something that, if you wanna talk about net neutrality on a show sometime, this is something that I've had a problem with quite a bit. Certain sites' ads include allowing various advertisers, like Facebook's advertising system and Google's advertising system and a few other advertising systems, to track what you're doing, even if you don't have a Facebook account, or even if you're not logged into Facebook on that computer. So that's what happens when you have something like that open along with Discord and a web thing to allow Discord to show through OBS, and OBS is running, and you have this specialized chat aggregator run open, and all on one laptop. And you try to open NYMag, and NYMag wants to track what you're doing and sell your information, and all of a sudden it's more than your computer can keep up with. So apparently I'm not going to be able to show stuff like that during the show, if we're doing all these other things. But I think we totally
Take
lost.
screenshots.
I don't know, Karen. Can you recapture what you were going to say?
Well, what I was saying is, essentially, my guy is 13 years younger than me, and he was in his mid-20s when we met, and nobody, or mid to late 20s, and nobody ever actually came out and suggested that I was taking advantage of somebody who couldn't make decisions for himself. And even when I was young, I met the man that I married when he was 38 and I was 21. And nobody suggested that, that he was, just too old, and, he's taking advantage of this much younger woman, blah, blah, blah. Right. But things have really changed. And it's just the whole idea of how women's sexuality is always pure, even when they're throwing it at a man. And if he takes her up on the offer, he is, the dirtiest fucking bastard who needs to burn in hell. It's not just the left and right that are polarizing. A lot of these ideas about men and women are polarizing as well. They're becoming less nuanced and more extreme. And so, I mean, you're not allowed to say anything bad about women. You're not allowed to say anything good about men. There's no such thing as a masculine virtue. And there's no such thing as a feminine vice, and that's just the way it has to be.
And there ought to be no such thing as due process anymore.
That's right, because that hurts women.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to say French Honey Badger gave us $5 and said ads have nothing to do with net neutrality, so net neutrality wouldn't help you in this instance. To a degree, that's correct. Ads themselves have nothing to do with net neutrality. Net neutrality, part of what net neutrality is about is your internet service provider isn't allowed to limit your speed with certain websites and say, well, we're not gonna allow you the bandwidth here, and that would help. And I think right now they are still allowed to do that. So, but no, it wouldn't change anything with ads. But back to the due process issue. That's a big thing, because we're in a situation right now where we have essentially handed not just women but the unscrupulous end of society a weapon that there's no defense against this weapon, because we've taken the defense away from anybody who ever gets targeted with this weapon, and that weapon is the smear of all smears, the wrecking ball of all smears, sexual misconduct. And there's like 3 levels of this type of smear. There's the violent level. There's the you took advantage of somebody who's not necessarily a kid, but who has some degree of vulnerability. And the vulnerability end of it, that spectrum runs from legitimate, it's bad, to obviously to take advantage of somebody who's unconscious or who is for any other reason incapacitated. And it's obviously it's bad to when you really genuinely have powers over someone like Weinstein did, use that to dominate somebody and force them into something that they don't want to do. And then you have the level of being accused of taking advantage of the most innocent, children and young teenagers. And all of them were being subjected now in society to a situation where once you're targeted with the weapon of accusations of any of these types of misconduct, there is no coming back. You can't you can't be acquitted in the eyes of part of the public. And if you are acquitted by the courts, or you're not condemned by the entire public, there's condemnation for the acquittal. How dare you get your name cleared? How dare other people allow your name to be cleared? The accusation itself should be enough. Even after it's been proved, that those accusations can be lies.
Yeah, I had somebody literally say, I knew somebody who knew Jean Gomeshi, and he was an asshole. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not what they were charging him with, so who gives a shit?
Yeah, no, and it's like, it's really like, and this was years ago, Alan Dershowitz said this, rape is considered such a heinous crime that it is considered a crime so heinous that not even innocence is a defense.
Yeah.
And that's, with that situation, we're setting ourselves up for not being able basically to get anything done in any area where there's controversy.
Well,
because all you have to have is, right, you're trying to get a law passed or a law reversed that's bad, maybe. Like, let's say somebody starts a movement to return a U.S. Domestic violence law to a genderless state, like it was when it was the Family Violence Protection or Prevention and Services Act of 1984, before it was changed to the Violence Against Women Act of 1994. So let's say somebody starts a movement to say, well, we still want to have shelters, we still want to have a 24-hour hotline, we still want the police to be trained that if violence happens and it's in the home, it's still violence, and if a crime was committed, if there was assault, if somebody's been battered, that's still a crime. But we don't want it to only apply when a man does it to a woman. We want it to go both ways. If somebody wants to stop that person, all they got to do is say, well, back when we were in high school, he walked in on me in the locker room when I was naked and then stayed there and made comments, you know. And if he can't conclusively prove that he didn't do that, which, you know, if it's 20 or 30 years ago, there's no way, you know, he's screwed. And even if he could prove that he didn't do it, then he's a victim blamer, and he's still screwed.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at Bill C-51 of 2017, not of 2015, because we have a weird numbering system for our bills in Canada, and you have to do. Bill C-51 2015 was an anti-terrorism bill. This one is an omnibus bill with all kinds of amendments that they're going to bring into Canada's sexual assault law, and rape shield protections in particular. And what the new standards that they're trying to bring in for rape shield test would essentially require the defendant to hand over virtually any evidence that he has of, you know, that he could use in his defense, almost everything, and hand it over in a closed hearing, not just with the judge and the prosecutor. And that I could maybe tolerate that, because the prosecutor is forbidden by law from disclosing any of that evidence to the complainant. You know, they are not allowed to do witness prep on the complainant. They are supposed to keep their distance. If they have any kind of interaction above and beyond the bare minimum with any of their witnesses, they end up being called to testify in a trial that they are prosecuting, and no prosecutor wants to do that. They cannot prep their witnesses in any way, shape, or form. But so the disclosure would be made not just to the judge and to the prosecutor, but to the complainant and the lawyer, the third-party lawyer that the complainant will be entitled to under this bill, right? So you're essentially showing the complainant everything you've got. You're showing your entire defense strategy. You're showing them all of the evidence that they may have assumed you didn't keep, but you did. The way Jian Ghomeshi kept the love letters and the emails and the texts and everything else, right? You'd have to hand all of that over. The only thing that they would have been able to bring in the Jian Ghomeshi case would have been, there would be two pieces of evidence that they would not have had to disclose to the complainants beforehand, and that was that he didn't own the car that he allegedly assaulted one of them in until 7 months after he allegedly assaulted her in it, and and the conversations between two of the complainants, where after they had given their statements to police prior and after. So they were colluding before they gave their statements to police and filed their reports. And when they did that, they would have been told not to discuss the case with each other at all. And they continued to do so through hundreds of text messages and the rest, right? And so they would have been able to bring that because those are not of a sexual nature. Those pieces of evidence are not communications of a sexual nature for a sexual purpose, but everything else would have had to be handed over and had the complainants have a look at it.
You know,
then decide, and then maybe it would have been admissible, maybe not. But if it was admissible, the complainants have now seen it all.
Your complaints, in my opinion, as far as that goes, I think they shouldn't be able to exclude any evidence that the defense wants to present.
Well, really, why should they?
This is a situation, and it's not that hard for an attorney to argue that a piece of evidence does not indicate a thing. You can go into court as an attorney and say, hey, we all know that having consented to sex in 1985 at the beginning of a relationship doesn't mean that this person consented to every instance of that the guy initiates or that the gal initiates. And in 1991, if this person says no, that the 1985 consent doesn't override that, you know. It doesn't matter if she consented to 50 other guys. This one she can still say no to. And but it's still perfectly reasonable to allow that to be admitted as evidence, because there are times when the gal's going to come in and pretend to be all virginal and prissy when in fact she consented to 50 other guys. So I didn't do that might be a reasonable thing for her to say, but I would never do that is a lie. She does it all the time, right? And this is a situation where the best thing that we could do in these cases is say, nope, the defense, no holds barred, unless they're trying to spam the court with evidence of global warming or something like that in a court case about sexual violence. There shouldn't be any limits on information they can introduce into the case. And it should be up to the opposing attorney, to the prosecutor, to argue why that piece of evidence is not relevant or is not applicable. And at the other end of it, the only thing that should make evidence from the prosecution's end ineligible to be admitted is if it was gathered illegally in violation of the defendant's civil rights. There's nothing... If the defendant has a criminal history, that should be relevant, or at least admissible. And again, it should be up to his attorney to argue this is not relevant. Just because he kicked some guy's ass back in the 80s doesn't mean he's guilty of rape in 1995, right? So that kind of thing, we've gotten into this situation where we've convoluted our courtroom processes in terrible ways that do nothing but hinder the pursuit of justice, which is really the pursuit of the correct course of action to take based on a rational assessment of all the facts in a truth-seeking mission. You find out what the truth of the situation is, and then you act on that information in the most rational and reasonable way possible.
And you do it when it is in the public interest, because the complainant is not the prosecutor's client, and the court is not there to serve the needs of the complainant. And this is where I think that everyone gets it so wrong. Like when feminist advocates say, well, the court, the system, the criminal system does not meet the needs of victims. It's not there to meet the needs of victims, right? If a victim wants to be a plaintiff in a case, if they want to be a party to a legal case, they can sue the person who raped or assaulted them in a civil court at their own expense, right? With their own counsel that represents them as a party to the case. The burden of proof is lower, like go for it. Go get your legal redress that way. But the prosecutor has a responsibility they have no responsibility whatsoever to the complainant. The complainant is not their client. The complainant isn't even a party to the case. The parties to the case are the defendant and the people, the public.
Right.
And the prosecutor,
the whole point of it is to establish what is or is not legal in your nation or in your community by applying penalties when laws are broken. That's right. When it is in the public interest, right? Because the public has decided, right, through the proper process of legislative action, legislative reform, legislative amendment, writing laws, legislators writing laws written and voted on, right, and passed by the elected representatives who are in those positions through the consent of the people, right? And so the people have decided these are the laws that we want to have enforced, right? And the prosecutor is supposed to be acting in the interests of the people who decided that these are the laws under which we will abide, right? And so, I mean, like, a crime in a criminal court is not a crime against the complainant, is a crime against us, right? And we get to decide, right? What is in our interest. But what is so frustrating about this is that it's these feminist activists do not realize how the law works. They do not realize why it works the way it does. They do not understand the dangers
of judges writing law, right? In Oklahoma, when there was that one case, where an unconscious woman, she was so drunk, her blood alcohol level was, she had alcohol poisoning, right? And she was completely unaware of what was going on. And the guy who helpfully gave her a ride home decided he was going to ejaculate in her mouth. And then drop her off at her grandmother's house. And she woke up several hours later in the middle of a battery of tests because she had, her grandmother finds her with spunk all over her freaking face, right? And unconscious on the freaking doorstep or whatever. So essentially the prosecutor charged the guy with forcible sodomy. And the Superior Court refused to expand the legal definition of force in Oklahoma law to include the particular elements of the case, because he did not apply physical force. He didn't have to. And everybody was up in arms. Everybody was screaming that it's perfectly legal to orally rape an unconscious woman in Oklahoma, which is completely fucking stupid and wrong. There's a perfectly good statute that would have applied. It's called sexual battery. It's about consent. It just says any touching of a lewd nature or whatever, or lascivious nature that occurs when the victim does not consent. Okay? Punishable by up to 10 years in prison. He could have charged this guy with that, right? Would have been easier to demonstrate. It would have been easier to find the guy guilty, because the parameters of forcible sodomy are very strict, right? And they're itemized, right? But the definition of consent is a little bit more forgiving of situations like this, right? It would be easier to argue that the victim did not consent, right? She was so drunk, she was unconscious, she did not consent. And, but they wanted these judges to essentially write law. And I'm thinking, like, there's this thing called, judicial independence, right? The courts are independent. Once they've been appointed or elected, they act independently of all of the other branches of government, right? Like their only loyalty, the only thing that governs them is the law as written. And so the moment that they start writing law, you essentially have a bunch of guys with enormous power who just get to make shit up as they go along. Is that what you really want? I don't understand these people.
We've had some bad things come out of that in the past. We definitely don't want that now. I want to say it is almost 10 o'clock, and so I'm going to have to end the show here. I've got one chat I'm going to read off because it was a really good chat, a really good point. It's not a super chat, but Moon Globes says, rape isn't taken seriously by people who say women shouldn't report to police because they won't be believed. And that's a really good point. If they took rape seriously, if they thought rape was as bad as they say they think it is, they would be encouraging women to go to the police anyway, in as many numbers as possible, to get it across that it happens as much as they think it does. But they're not. They're saying just the opposite. So that is a really good point. We might continue this in the next show. I haven't quite decided what the topic of that is going to be. I believe it's going to be Thanksgiving night is the next Badger Talk, HBR Talk. So
not for us.
Not for me. It's Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So I may pick a different topic and skip a week and then come back to this. But we'll see. In any case, I have two things to shill before we hop out of here, and then we will be done with the show and on to the after show. So the first one, I wanted to point out here at Honey Badger Radio for having discussions like the one you just heard, where we make points that are not necessarily very popular in the political correctness end of the political spectrum. We have been labeled guilty of wrongthink, and as such are on the wrong side of YouTube. So if you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because our channels have been sent to the gulag, go to badgerfeed.com. Also, we're going to be moving to a digest format for podcasting, so if you're listening to this in an audio format and you still want to be able to follow our uncut live streams, you will also be able to find those at badgerfeed.com. So, just go to badgerfeed.com. It's where all the cool kids are. And the other one is, we have our court case coming up. Remember in January, following our previous hearing, we emerged victorious against our opponents' delaying and obfuscation tactics. Mostly. They did manage to delay the case until November. And holy shit, guys, it's November now! So I guess that's why Allison put up a fundraiser to get us back to Calgary for another round in the courtroom. To help us out, please go to feedthebadger.com and click on the featured project, Infiltrating Alberta Civil Court, Disguised as Ourselves. Folks, no space leper has ever infiltrated this far into an earthly institution. With your help, we could go all the way. That didn't come out right. It probably isn't the best for this this particular topic matter. But seriously,
yeah.
We didn't do nothing. We didn't do nothing, and we want to talk to our lawyer first. So just go to feedthebadger.com, okay? Help a leper out.
All right, and also, show up and be in the courtroom if you can.
Yes, as many as possible. We would love to see you there. It would be very helpful for us to have people in the courtroom to witness the action. This is something that, from experience, I can tell you, the more people are there to see the court proceedings, the more likely everything will be done above board. I have personally seen in at least 2 cases, men's who the direction of their court case when they were falsely accused was actually affected dramatically by the fact that there were some of us there to see what the judge was doing, what the prosecutor was doing, how the proceedings were run and everything. They're going to behave an entirely different way when there are witnesses to their actions. And that's not necessarily true of every judge. There are plenty of judges out there that are always above board. But the best way to ensure that that's going to happen, if you don't know the judge, is to have people in the courtroom to see what they're doing. And with that, I would like to thank my co-hosts and all of our listeners and all of the people in the background who helped with this. We had quite a bit of help from our invisible artists that never get any credit, and I don't know if I'm allowed to name names or not, aside from, I think I'm allowed to name Andrew. But in any case, with that animation, which was just awesome. I really love that. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Night all.